Hi friend, in this video we're going to be making a retro tech house song inspired by Chris Lorenzo's song, California Dreamin'. We're going to find out if we can do this in under 6 hours by using the 80-20 rule of tech house music production. And what you're listening to right now is the song that we'll be working on. And what you're looking at right now is the Ableton project file that we'll be working on. In particular, we're going to go over everything in the order that I actually created it. So we're going to start by going over the drums layer by layer, followed by the bass layer by layer, and then all the melodic instruments like the vocals, and mostly just vocals actually in this one. It's a pretty minimal track, which is really cool. All in all, make sure you stick around to the end of the video because we'll be doing a full recap of that 80-20 rule so you can apply what you're learning here to your own songs. Because all in all, it did only take about 6 hours for me to recreate this track and turn it into one of my own, including arranging it, mixing it, mastering it, so it's ready to be played in DJ sets or sent out to labels. So finishing songs faster just like this is something you'd like help with. I've made you a completely free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that I use to completely finish one song just like this every single week. Just visit the link that's on screen now or in the description to grab the ultimate song finishing toolkit for free. And if you want to take things to the next level, you can also find a link to this video's project files in the description as well. With that said, let's jump into this. Alright. So when it comes to the drums for this one, this is kind of what we're listening to right here. This is the drum track that I recreated. Let me just solo it out. And this is the reference drums. What I made. And the reference. It's a little different, but mine sounds maybe a little bit less minimal than the original. But with that, let's jump through this. So one of the first things I do is I make sure that the reference track is in here. So we have the song in here, and I usually set it up so when I press the S key, if you look over here, it'll flip between the reference track and what we have going on. And then the first element that I usually go for is the kick, kind of like the most important thing, almost when it comes to dance music like this. So it's usually what I go for first. So let's have a look and listen to that. And so what I've done with this is, which is a 4-on-the-4 kick pattern, as you can see here. And what I did is I did use the Ableton similar sound feature to extract the kick. So I believe it was over here potentially. So I found this little snippet, I cut it up, and then if you go show in browser, and then you press this little button here, you'll get a bunch of sounds that are similar to the kick that you just extracted. So then over here, I dropped in a couple of the kicks that I like. These ones are from Rocket Powered Sound, who are also sponsoring this video. And then what I also like to do is I drop that kick into, there it is. I drop that kick into this little rack that I've made, where it's just a couple of quick little macros you can use to kind of isolate the kick a little bit more. And so by itself, it sounds like that. And what I've been doing is layering it in. So this is the actual kick that I took from the song. And I'm just cutting out a bunch of the lows so that I could bring in the volume a little bit to kind of layer it in with the one shot that I ended up picking. So the one shot that I picked was this. And I'm just layering this above it to add a little bit of extra character and kind of make it sound even closer to the actual kick from the original tune. Then, other than that, something I've been doing a lot lately is running into this drum bus. So it's adding a bit of saturation, and the main thing is it adds this boom, which is kind of like a sub sound at the bottom of the kick. Can kind of help it make it sound a little bit more fuller and thicker and more professional in some kind of way. So let me show you without this drum bus, and then with. Kind of sounds a little bit like deeper and darker. It gets rid of some of the low end. Other than that, once you have the pattern, and you have select the right samples with maybe a little bit of light processing like this, the main thing that I've been finding is just to flick back and forth to the reference and what you have, and mainly just trying to get the volumes correct. The volumes is really going to be that thing that gets you 80% of the way up there. So that's kind of the idea there. And then the next element that I added in is either going to always be the open hat or the snare or clap. Whichever you hear is kind of popping out a bit more to you is what I'd recommend. In this instance, if we listen to the the reference. I was kind of hearing open hi-hat. So let's have a listen and look at the pattern that we came up with here. The reference. And what we have. And so for this, what I actually did was very similar with the similar sound feature, or really just before. I extracted an area of the song where the open hat was playing by itself, and then just dropped it into this little rack here, where I just added a bit of like saturation, and I transposed it down 2 semitones. Then I copied it over here, and I made a second one where it's transposed up 2 semitones. I'm not fully sure if you can hear it in the original tune. Kind of sounds like every 2 hits, it's maybe there's more sustain in the open hi-hat, or just like some kind of change. So the way that I interpreted it was by adding in that higher pitch sound, which makes it sound a little bit different. It kind of makes it sound like it's changing over time. And then what I do have layered here as well is this hat here. So if we just play it by itself, compared to the reference. So similar, not as powerful, and that's why I layered it on top with the actual sounds from the actual tune. And then in terms of any processing, just removing a bunch of the lows, using this transient shaper to bring down the sustain a little bit. This is a free kilohertz transient shaper. I've just mapped the main knobs to an Ableton rack, so it's quick to access, to open it up and all that. Tightening up the sustain so that it sounds like the hat's a little bit tighter. You're using a ton of saturation to bring up the volume on and everything here. And then again, the main thing is kind of trying to listen back and forth. Really focusing on the open hi-hat. Trying to get the volumes to sound as similar as possible is really the trick there. The next element that I like to add in here was this closed hi-hat. So let's take a look and listen to that. I'm going to solo it for you as well. And so the main idea here is it's just a kind of classic hi-hat pattern. It's on the offbeats here. And what I've done similar to the other one was I've layered in 2 different sounds. And so it's kind of copying that same idea where it's like the first 2 are a little lower, and then this other one's a bit higher. And then we have the main one playing through. And I've slightly moved things off the grid a little bit to give a bit of a groove. And so it's not hitting on the exact same time as all these closed hi-hats, as well as all of the open hi-hats as well. And the main thing, listening to the main thing is the volume there, is what I really want to get across. So other than that, any other processing is just moving to the low, tightening up the sustain a little bit so it's hitting a bit tighter, and some saturation kind of make it sound a bit more fuller and add a little bit of grit to the sound as well. The next element that I added, you can hear that kind of clap snare. That was the one that I wanted to add in next, so let's take a look and listen to what I added. And so basically what we have is like kind of the classic on the 2 and 4, but I also kind of heard this little bit of shuffling that also is going to come in from the top loop that we're going to add in a bit, but I wanted to add that in here as well to give it a little bit of extra pizzazz. And so what I did here for listening to the pattern, just listening to the reference, flicking back and forth a little bit, just like that. In terms of the sound for this one, the samples that I ended up selecting, the way that I selected it was, what we have here is this one right here. So I took another slice from the actual tune and then used a similar sound feature to find this one. And then just layered in with these other snares that I just kind of like. So just like a process of using the similar sound features, slicing stuff from the actual drum track, and then just layering it in. So a little bit of like testing out different ideas. Main way that I kind of do that is like this. So you can just click on the piano roll like this, and you can move it around and just kind of audition it, and then flicking back and forth like in real time with the reference. It's kind of the main thing. In terms of the processing here, nothing much, just using this standard channel strip mix as you go that I usually go for, removing a bunch of the lows, tightening the sound up a bit by bringing the thing down, bringing up the saturation a bit to kind of fill out the sound a little bit like that. Let's have a listen. That's the reference. That's what we got. So still not quite there, which is why the next thing I layered in was this clap. So let's take a look and listen to it with the clap. And without it. And with it. And against the reference. So I think the clap really adds a lot to it. The clap's kind of that main, like, higher end bit of the sound. The snare's a little bit more of that lower body in this instance. The way that I found the sound, again, well, the pattern was really just classic snare clap on the 2, 4, 2, 4, 2, 4. And then the way that I found the sound is like I just have this like drum rack that I created with a bunch of my favorite clap sounds, and simply went through the process of either using the selector here to move the sample, or just going into the MIDI and moving it until like something kind of sounded right. Really, it's all just trial and error for the most part. And using your ear and flicking back and forth to the reference, for sure. Then other than that, any other processing, removing a bit of the lows, adding some saturation to fill out the sound a little bit. Definitely a lot of saturation going on in this, kind of saturation or distortion, because it kind of has that cool retro, old school, vintage kind of vibe. And so adding in saturation throughout different points was the way that I went about trying to emulate that. The next thing I added in was this top loop here. So let's take a look and listen to this. And let's listen to the reference. And listening for that like Congo, bongo kind of percussion loop. So what I did to find this was I just looked up on Splice a different like bongo kind of percussion loop, and then found a slice where it kind of had a similar kind of groove, that little rolling bongo groove. And then I just chopped it up and cut it up so that it was repeating that little bit instead of like this full crazy drum loop, and ended up with this. Panned it a little bit to the left, and then removed a bit of the lows. I used this one knob width plugin from Polyverse called Wider, which is free. It's really awesome. Just map the knobs again to Ableton Rack for simplicity, but it also has this one feature to make it mono. So I wanted to mono it, and then added a bit of overdrive to kind of make it again sound a little grittier, like that vintagey sound that you can kind of hear in the original track. Tightening it up a bit with the sustain, a little bit of one knob sidechain to give it that pumping effect, make it so it's making room for the kick, and a little saturation to bring it out. And also the way that I do sidechain is with this shaper device, going to quarter notes, which is what the kick is usually playing anyways, and it's just ducking a gain. So I have to look at that one. Then the next thing that I added in was another bongo kind of congo loop to add to it. So this one, the first one was panned a bit to the left. This one's panned a bit to the right to kind of balance it out. Take a look and listen to that. I'm going to solo the new one. And against the reference. Can't hear it as much as this was more like a starting to take liberties and put it in my own direction at this point. So I found this other one that's a little bit more involved. Took away a bit of the low end, a little bit of sidechain, so it's pumping, making room for the kick, and that's about it. Then the next thing I added in was this little guy. Let's solo it. And for this, what I was trying to do was similar, if you can hear it in the reference. There's like a little bit of like that kind of shuffling, ghost note, kind of flam drum bit, and that's kind of what I was trying to emulate this. What I did was I just found a sample and chopped up the bit where it's kind of doing that little shuffle bit. Sometimes it's better to grab a sample like that, or like a loop, especially when it's a kind of a live drummed element. It can be harder to program those things in, and that's why I went with that. And then the last thing I added was this additional percussion loop. Solo it. So very subtle. This was definitely me taking things in a different direction, trying to get a little bit more of that shuffling, grooving kind of thing going on. And I went up with something that's like a lot more experimental and weird, but it was a nice way to add a little bit of texture to everything and have a listen to everything. Yeah, and I think that's a look at the drums for this one. All right, all right, all right. So when it comes to kind of all the melodic elements for this one, we're gonna go over the bass and really just vocals, which is really cool about this track. It's really just drums, bass, and vocals, and some kind of effects and stuff like that. First thing that I always do is do the drums first. So if you haven't seen that yet, make sure you check that out. Drums is always the first thing I tackle when doing these things, and making sure that the reference track is in here, so you can flip back and forth while you're making all your decisions, while you're producing and mixing and everything like that. So with the drums kind of set, let's take a listen to the bass that came up with it. And with the drums. And so the way that I went about this is I took a slice of the tune right here. If we listen to it. Right there, and just cut it. And then what I did is actually I dragged it into an empty MIDI clip, just like this, and then said convert to melody. And this kind of gives you like a first rough understanding of what like some of the notes are. It's never perfect, but it is like a really nice shortcut that I like to do. And then from there, it was just about moving the notes a bit to kind of more accurately represent what that bass is playing in the actual tune, and then adjusting it to sound a little bit more unique so I can change it into my own tune. So let's have a listen to it. So this is what we ended up with. Take a look at the pattern, have a look at it. I'm not the best at explaining into the music theory. That's kind of why I use these like tools where you can convert to melody and all that. And then once the notes were in place, let's take a look at the sound design. So what I usually like to do is have two bass tracks. One is the sub, taking care of the low end, and another is the mid bass that's taking care of a bit more of the character. So if we have a listen to just the sub, it sounds like this. Very low, just kind of taking up some of the bottom. And what I have here is this B sub rack that I made. It's just Ableton Operator doing sine waves, because sine wave is like the most basic, lowest possible kind of perfect for low end, basically. And what I have is we're running into a bit of one knob side chain over here. So it's kind of giving that pumping effect. If I open this up, it's just all part of the rack, and it's a right here. It's just an Ableton shaper device going to quarter notes. Quarter notes is the note that the kick drum is playing, and then it's just ducking the gain. That way you don't have to do any weird like compression, mapping, and routing and all that stuff to get the side chain. It just can be done with one knob, which I really like. And then other than that, just removing some of the high end too. So there's one of these, an auto filter here, and I'm just rolling off a bunch of the high. So it's really just trying to isolate almost just the low end. Then what I do is I added in this mid bass layer. So when we add that together, actually if I solo it. And so for this, in terms of the MIDI, you'll notice there's no MIDI here. Instead of typing or like having the MIDI on this track, if you go here, you switch from all ins will pay attention to the MIDI that's on the track, but you can also have it so the MIDI from another track's coming in. So I set it to subs. So if I make any changes here, it's automatically be routed in here. What I did was found a cool basic like a bass guitar one shot, and then in Splice. And then I also have this pitch device, so it's going up I think 3 octaves, because when you do that little trick where the all-ins or the subs MIDI is coming into your mid bass MIDI track, that sub octave might be too high or too low. So instead of having to duplicate it and like shift it up a bunch, you can use one of these pitch devices to just do it right from there. Then another big thing when working with mid bass is removing some of the low end here so that the sub is taking care of that low end. And then I just removed some of the high end to kind of shape it a bit. And then we're doing a little bit of this one knob side chain again, a little bit of saturation to fill out the sound a little bit. And I'm also using this one knob width plugin called Polyverse Wider, which is really sweet. And I've just mapped the core knobs here to an Ableton rack. So I'm adding a bit of width. So the mid bass is taking a little bit more of a stereo fullness kind of effect going on, while the sub is centered and just taking care of all of that low end. That kind of look and listen to that, because really there's not too much here when it comes to the rest of the tune. I'm going to show you what we have going on melodically. So what I decided for this one was I wanted to kind of do a similar thing where instead of like California Dreamin', like an old band from that era. I went with the Zombies' Time of the Season, and I'll kind of show you what it looks like here. So the beginning of the track, there's just this little very similar if you listen to the original track. So just snatching a bit of it. And then there's also this cool bit in like this wasn't so much in the reference track as much, but the Time of the Season has that cool like bit. So I added that in here as well. Alone it sounds like this. And to get the vocal, what I did was I found the song on YouTube, to be honest, and then I uploaded it into Lala, and I used that separate stem separation to get the vocal separated by itself. Let's have a listen to it when like the full tune kind of playing in. So the main thing here is you can see I kind of cut it up a little bit, trying to, some of like that ooh ah stuff was coming in the vocal track, so I was trying to remove that. Main thing is just to kind of get the timing nicely, so you can see there's some warp markers here, making sure that the timing is good. Other than that, there's not much really to like the melodic stuff here. Some stuff of the processing that I did do to this vocal to kind of give it a little bit more of that vintagey sound that you can kind of hear in the reference. Let's have a listen to it. Distorted, kind of like reverbed a little bit, sounding vintage and interesting. They'll kind of take you through how I went about that. Main thing here is this RC20, so it's adding some like vinyl crackle, a little like distortion, a bit of this like kind of like tape sound. One of the biggest things that I've been loving for this is there's this space echo device I found in Ableton, and that's giving it this like really vintagey, echoey, reverby kind of delay sound. So if you have a listen. That echoey, cool, vintagey sound is coming from this space echo, and then the standard channel strip that I have on all my tracks. So removing some of the lows with making room for the kick and the sub and all that to really take care of the low end. A little bit of one knob sidechain, so the vocals pumping a little bit, making room for the kick, but also kind of giving it that dance vibe. A little saturation to bring out the sound a bit more, fill it out, and then also give it a bit of grit, that kind of vintagey texture. And then I'm using this one knob with plugin again, but using the mono feature to kind of just center everything in. Other than that, the main thing is to like flick back and forth. Flick back and forth between that, really focusing on the vocal, trying to get the volumes right. Really, one of the main things is the volume. So if you can focus on that, you're really in good shape. Other than that, there was just a bunch of these little effects. Because what's so really cool about this track is it's really just drums, bass, vocals, and a little bit of like effects. So you might hear, let's try it over here. So for that, just found a bunch of different risers, like this one here. Why are we not hearing that? Oh, I had to turn it on. Here we go. So it's just like a down. It was a white noise riser that I reversed, so you can hear these kind of like sounds. Are all over the place and that's really kind of the main thing. It almost happened at the beginning of each bar or each phrase. And if you listen to the reference, that kind of thing. So that's really all there is to it when it comes to the melodic stuff. The main thing is getting the bass, and then like a cool vocal, and then as like a little bonus, we'll also do a little bit of a look at the arrangement. So usually what I'll do, one of the first things also is once I get the reference track in here, I'll also use these empty MIDI clips here to kind of signal where all of the different parts of the song are. So that way I can know when I want to work on the drums, I'm going to go to the intro or the outro. When I want to work on the vocals, I'm going to go to one of these drops. And it also really helps because then once you build up the song vertically, maybe you get like a point like this. You can then very easily stretch out that vertical arrangement into a horizontal arrangement by just following the cues here. So this one, it's always usually moving in 16 or 32 bars, so it's 16 bars of intro, 16 bars of the sub, quite a long break here, which is really cool, and about 32 bars of a drop. Then it builds down. So the build down would be like there's vocals, building down, no vocals, and it has this part where it's removing a bunch of the drums. And then a big cool thing is like letting the vocal play by itself. Into another big drop. Goes on a little bit longer. A little pause. And then about, I want to say, I think it's about 32 bars of a build down. So it's like no vocals are playing. It's allowing the DJ to kind of mix out. And then there's also there's the drum outro at the end there. So if you want to take a look at the project file, definitely recommend you do so. You can have a closer look at the arrangement here as well as all the little details. But again, main takeaway of this one, which is so cool, one of the reasons I want to do this one is like that cool vintage vocal with like just drums and bass and just a little bit of like effects. Super, super cool. So yeah, if you want to check that out, you can. Also, we'll do a recap of the 80-20 rule when it comes to all this, so you can apply what you're learning to your own music. And before we also move on, I want to mention that this video is sponsored by friends over at Rocket Powered Sound. They hooked up the kick drum samples that you're hearing in this track, which is super useful because the kick is a very important part of the drums. And if you'd like, you can grab this. It's from their Ultimate Sample Pack. You can get 30% off by using the link that's on the description or on screen right now. Thank you to our friends for that. And with that said, let's jump into the 80-20 rule for this one.
Hi, my friend, Matt from Best Friends Club here. And if you've been paying attention to this super long video, then you've probably figured out what the 80-20 rule is when it comes to building out your songs. The goal here is to get 80% of the result with only 20% of the time, energy, and effort. And because the first key to the 80-20 rule here is to use a reference track, we're making sure that we're very easily hitting 80% of a high quality, professionally made song. In particular, we use that reference track to make sure that we're picking the right notes, sounds, and volumes as we're building out our song. The second key of the 80-20 rule here is to mix as you go in an extremely streamlined way by only focusing on the volume of each track, as well as using a simple repeatable channel strip for each track that we're adding to our songs. The third and final key is to repurpose your old project files and have a suite of powerful templates, Ableton racks, and one-knob effects that you've personalized and curated over time. If you'd like to get a head start by downloading all the racks, templates, and all the files that you've seen me use in the Ableton project file for this video, or if you'd just like to take a closer look at any of the techniques or tracks you saw me work on in this video at your own pace, you can find a link to this video's project files on screen now, and at the second link that's in the YouTube description. I'm recreating a different song from the Beatport top charts every single week and making the project files available to anyone who wants them. You'll also get access to a private Discord where you can ask me and the community questions, as well as share tracks for feedback. If you or your music are not quite ready for a shot in the arm like that, I've also made you a completely free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that have helped me figure out how to completely finish one new song each and every single week. And you can grab that free Ultimate Song Finishing Toolkit by visiting the first link that's in the YouTube description here. However, if you just feel like staying on YouTube for now, that's totally fine. Save that link for later and check out this playlist filled with videos just like the one you just watched, where I completely create songs inspired by tracks found in the Beatport top charts. Or if you really want to take what you've learned in this video to the next level, make sure you check out this video right here.